Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our presentation this evening. My name is Neil Vandry. I'm your officiator here at the Church of Perpetual Life. I'm so glad to see you all come tonight. We've got a wonderful presentation. We have two speakers this evening. Now, we have presentations typically every month, and next month we'll be having Jim Stroll and Bernadine coming to speak from People Unlimited. I think you'll enjoy that. Tonight, I'd like to get right into the program as we have these two marvelous speakers. Our first speaker this evening is a gentleman who many of you have met, who speaks here often, Mr. Bill Falloon. He's compiled a 1,500-page medical book, Disease Prevention and Treatment, and he has a latest book, Pharmacracy, How Corrupt Deals and Misguided Medical Regulations Are Bankrupting America and What to Do About It. He's also the director and co-founder of Life Extension Foundation. He's been featured in hundreds of media appearances, including The Phil Donahue Show, Joan Rivers, Tony Brown's Journal, ABC News Day One, and Newsweek magazine. So let's all give a welcome to Mr. Bill Falloon.
Neil, thank you so much. It is an incredible privilege to be standing here tonight before this congregation. The reason I say it's a privilege is that never before in medical history has anyone been able to put on a credible scientific presentation describing a human clinical study whose primary endpoint is meaningful and systemic age reversal. We are seeking to reverse the aging process in elderly humans. We define elderly as being over 55 years of age and demonstrating some clinical sign of senescence. This study is going to occur in South Florida. We're going to enroll 30 to 50 older individuals, and we're going to take blood from younger individuals, average age of 21. We're going to mobilize those individuals ahead of time so that they have lots of stem cells flowing through their bodies, and we're going to pull out those stem cells and plasma components and put those into the older people. The objective being a reversal of the aging process in those older individuals. So what we're going to talk about today is the science that substantiates the reason why we are doing this unprecedented clinical study on human beings. I like to open up every lecture I give with a historic analogy. Some of you in this room know a lot about what you're seeing on the screen right now. But the fact of the matter is, we know today more about aging than what our ancestors did about smallpox. And you may ask, why is that relevant? Well, it's relevant because they were able, they being the scientists of the past, were able to eradicate smallpox in areas that had widespread vaccination before they even knew a virus existed. Think about that. They were able to eradicate this disease that was, in many years, was the leading killer around the world before they knew what caused it. That's a spectacular scientific achievement. What we're doing with the stem cell mobilized young blood components of younger people, putting it into older people, is we're seeking to clinically reverse their aging process. Well, if we do it, we may not know which blood components from those young people was the effective entity. But does it really matter? If we take older people and make them younger, does it matter how we did it? And the fact is, it doesn't. It didn't matter for people in 1840 in England who were universally vaccinated, and smallpox just disappeared. No one knew about viruses, but they weren't getting smallpox anymore. So that's just a little bit of a historical analogy that I like to bring up so that we understand where we are in history today. And the premise behind the research that we are going to conduct is a technology called Parabiosis. You're going to hear a lot more about this over the next several years because research into this area of age reversal technology is occurring at the most prestigious universities in the world. But the word para, and in the Greek language, means alongside, and biosis is life, and it's alongside life. But what we're doing here is taking young blood. we're refining that young blood in a way that it has high concentrations of those youthful constituents and then transfusing it into the bodies of elderly people who may only have a few years to live, but our objective is meaningful age reversal in those elderly people. Now, there's two ways of doing parabiosis. In the animal models, they take an old animal and they surgically put it together with a younger animal. So they share the same blood system. And in response to that, the older animal becomes younger, and the older animal lives longer. Now, that's not feasible to do in humans, unless someone wants to volunteer here. A young 21-year-old, if you want us to surgically attach you to a 90-year-old, we can potentially do that. But I don't think too many people would volunteer, and it's not even practical in human beings. Our systems are more complex, and it would wind up killing both organisms if we did that. But what we are able to do is take young people and use a drug called granulocyte colony stimulating factor and mobilize the stem cell compartment of these young individuals so they produce 100 times more stem cells and youth proteins, and then we can remove those over a 6-hour period from the young person through a technique known as apheresis. We can remove those young components of blood and then put it into a plasma concentrate that we inject into the older person. So of those two ways of deriving parabiosis rejuvenation, to the right, you'll see the mouse is getting the injection. That's how we plan to do that with human beings. Now, a study done in 1972, and there were many studies, by the way, done before and after 1972, but this particular one looked at longevity. And they were able to induce a lifespan extension effect, human equivalent of 10 to 12 years. Now that is a potential game changer for so many people. You give a person an extra 10 to 12 years at the rate technology is advancing today, well, you may enable that person to live for a very long time. Based on the stepping stone, stair-step approach that Aubrey de Grey looks at, and in Ray Kurzweil to an extent, if we can continue to extend our healthy lifespan, we can avail ourselves to the wonderful technologies in the future. So you see the study up there, 1972, and interestingly, between 1972 and just a few years ago, not a whole lot of research was done. But over the last 3 years, a number of studies were done to see if parabiosis was an effective way of reversing aging. And what the scientists are consistently finding is that parabiosis rejuvenates virtually every organ system in an old animal. That young blood is facilitating an age reversal effect. And what I'm doing here is just taking some quotes out of this Nature article, because you can see this was published just a few months ago, January 21st, 2015. This is how new this technology is to the younger scientists who have studied the work that people did in the 1960s and 1970s, but they're basically copying it and they're improving it. So they're seeing rejuvenation of the heart, the brain, the muscle, the liver, the bone marrow. They're seeing systemic rejuvenation occur. And that's critical because older people, unfortunately, not just one thing goes wrong with them. Lots of things go wrong. So if we don't induce a systemic age reversal effect, then we're not going to accomplish our objectives. These are quotes from two scientists involved in parabiosis research. They're both very optimistic. One of them says parabiosis repairs damage. That's critical. An old person has a lot of accumulated damage. They need to have that repaired. Other people think it's a de-aging effect. So that we have good quality scientists giving very strong opinions as to the potential that parabiosis has in reversing human aging. Now this is taken out of Nature, and what I want to point out on this graph is, if you look at the chart, it starts out around 1950, and you see how much parabiosis research was being done. And it peaked around 1972, 1973, and it fell off a cliff. This is not unusual when it comes to advancements in medical science. CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, they were doing that in the 1600s. And then in the late 1800s, they stopped for all kinds of reasons, but they stopped and didn't resume it seriously until the early 1950s. This is how medical technology goes, unfortunately. It does not consistently improve. It sometimes stops, goes downhill, and goes back up. Young blood rejuvenates old animals. We know that for a fact. That's not a disputable issue. There has been dozens of successful parabiosis studies that validate this method of reversing aging. The question is this going to work in humans? Well, we know we have to be a little bit more sophisticated because human blood contains a lot of factors that would react if it were transfused continuously into an older person. So we have to isolate what constituents in young blood are responsible for this rejuvenation effect. And as I said, the scientific journals continue to substantiate that young blood can rejuvenate old animals, rejuvenate old brains, rejuvenate tissues. And the mechanism that it does it, you might find fascinating. And that is, stem cells are required to sustain life. But as we get older, our stem cells turn off. They don't produce the activity that they need to keep us alive. What happens in the parabiotic situation is the older animal's stem cells are turned back on. Their own stem cells of the older animal are turned back on to facilitate youthful function. And we see this consistently across the board. This particular slide shows the different university research centers that are doing successful parabiosis research. We see Harvard, we see Cambridge, we see Stanford. These are the most prestigious universities in the world, and they're doing the kind of research that we believe now should be translated into the human arena. It's time that we start treating humans as well as animals are being treated in a laboratory setting. Now, I mentioned different proteins that are in young blood. One that has some people excited is GDF-11. That stands for Growth and Differentiating Factor 11. It's one of the factors in young blood that may turn on stem cells in older individuals. And when they infuse GDF into animals, all kind of wonderful things happen. The kind of things that would be expected if you're going to reverse aging. And that's what happens in response to GDF administration. Young people have lots of GDF circulating in their body. Old people don't. So in the study that we're proposing, we're going to take this young mobilized blood and hopefully put lots of GDF-11 and other proteins back into these older people to restore them to a more youthful state. 5 million Americans today suffer congestive heart failure. 5 million. And the treatments can delay the progression of it, but these people normally will succumb to that disorder. Parabiosis helps restore damaged heart muscles. And if that's all parabiosis did, that in of itself would be a huge medical advance. And it would potentially ignite a firestorm of interest into research aimed at reversing aging, because they're going to see, wow, if you put young factors into an older animal, their hearts get better. Just that one fact alone could ignite the interest that we need to see age reversal research become a reality. So in 2015, lots and lots of favorable research showing how young blood rejuvenates older animals. And it does it again in multi-organ systems. If all it did is rejuvenate a few organs, that would be good. It would be a breakthrough, but it wouldn't accomplish what this church wants to accomplish, and that is the attainment of physical immortality. This is that stepping stone we feel towards giving us that extra 10 to 12 years or more of healthy lifespan so that we don't suffer the debilities of aging and that we can live longer than what we may be programmed to do already. So a novel human clinical study. I cannot tell you how much effort goes into designing studies, putting all the pieces together. I've been working on it for over a year. A number of other people have been contributing their intellect and their efforts to making this a reality. We plan to do it in South Florida. We think some people will fly in from around the world to participate. One of the big challenges is recruiting young donors. We'll be paying those young donors a lot of money, but still it's sometimes challenging to get those young donors. Now, even modest success of this study, if we just get a 10 to 30% reversal in the aging process, it will spare Medicare from potential insolvency. In other words, old people won't need all this medical care anymore because they're going to be younger. They won't require all of this medicine. And of course, what we're all looking for is adding decades of healthy lifespan. If parabiosis gives us 10 or 12 years of additional lifespan and some other technology improves, well, we may just walk up a set of stairs towards immortality. So this research is the only one that I know of today that can be applicable to elderly humans, and it's available, we hope, in South Florida based on how we're working. The brain is the area that all of us notice as we age past 30 to 40. We don't remember as well. And the reason we don't remember as well, there's a lot of structural problems that occur with the aging brain. And that's seen very clearly with an electron microscope. Even an MRI can pick up all kinds of deficiencies in older brains. Parabiosis reverses systemic brain aging. Many of the factors involved in brain aging are reversed by parabiosis. Muscle loss, sarcopenia is a technical term for that, and it's what induces frailty in so many older people. They don't even have the strength in their muscles to perform the way they need to just to deal with daily activities. Well, GDF11, through parabiosis, it restores muscle mass, and that would theoretically then improve insulin sensitivity, and that would in fact improve lifespan rather greatly. So we have valid, documented evidence right now through a multitude of animal studies. If this were only done once or twice, we'd really question, is it really going to work? But you can see all of these slides are referenced. These are mostly different studies, but they all uncover the same information. Young blood, when transfused into older animals, induces systemic age reversal benefits, including that critical microglial area of the brain. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but that's an area that deteriorates, that creates a lot of the dementia that people suffer from. So we're seeing the consistency. Our blood vessels, our endothelium, as we get older, it's our Achilles tendon. Stroke, heart attack, kidney failure, that's often a result of endothelial dysfunction. Parabiosis rejuvenates the blood vessels. It doubles the perfusion into the brain. And that's a huge problem with aging people. They just don't have the amount of blood circulating in their brain that they did when they were older. Puts them at risk for stroke, for Alzheimer's, for all kind of neurodegenerative illnesses. Well, parabiosis corrects that. So this is where we're getting really excited. Now, 1 year ago, the Harvard Gazette published the results of what Harvard people are doing with their research. And they're consistently seeing that you put the proteins from young animals into older animals and they become younger. And these are just some excerpts from the Harvard Gazette where they're seeing the consistency of failing hearts, the brains, the skeletal muscles. They're seeing consistent age reversal merely by putting young animal blood into old animals. And again, we can't do that with humans. This has got to be a very sophisticated technique if we're going to induce the age reversal without inducing side effects. But the fact is, they're seeing it in consistent studies with animals. So the fact that we know it works in animals means we've got to translate that into humans, and this is what we plan to do. Now, Dr. Jarvik is a biochemist at Carnegie Mellon. His brother is the famous Jarvik artificial heart inventor. This is not that Dr. Jarvik, but he wants to do parabiosis research in pets. And I've had a number of conversations with him. He feels very confident that he can do it. He thinks some people will like their pets more than their relatives, and they might sign their pets up to have this done. So that's where he's working, out of Pittsburgh. But again, I mentioned Harvard, Stanford, Cambridge. There's numbers of universities that are all doing the same thing. They all want to see age reversal occur. But maybe the most impressive slide I show tonight will be the fact that Johnson & Johnson, the largest pharmaceutical company in the world, they've just put $50 million into a study at Stanford where they're going to try parabiosis research in human beings. They are looking to reverse Alzheimer's disease using GDF11 and other proteins from young donors. That study is going to take a long time. J&J's motivation is to patent a synthetic drug based on what they pull out of the young donors. And my concern is they may take 10 years to make that happen. A lot of people in this room don't have 10 years left to live. And at some point, none of us will have 10 years to live. So we want to do a study that will enable us to apply the systemic benefits of parabiosis technology to the entire body so that we can enjoy that systemic rejuvenation effect. But the fact that Johnson & Johnson put in $50 million, which is not a lot of money to them, but it's still significant, they feel this has the potential to reverse at least neurologic aging and perhaps Alzheimer's. So it's an interesting analogy for us to believe that this has some reality to it. So what are we going to do? We have designed a clinical study. We're going to take 30 to 50 elderly people, and elderly can be over 55 if you've got some medical problems, and we're going to then recruit tissue-type matched younger donors, average age of about 21. We're going to shoot them up with this drug, granulocyte colony stimulating factor. And that's exactly what it does. It stimulates the colonies in the bone marrow to produce lots of immune cells and stem cells, and more importantly, these youth proteins. We're going to carefully separate that blood. We're going to cryopreserve the stem cells, by the way. We are not going to put young stem cells into older people. The reason being, we risk something called graft versus host disease, which is a horrific condition. It strikes about 40% of leukemia patients who undergo stem cell transplants. They get cured of the leukemia, and then the graft versus host disease kills them. It causes an autoimmune reaction to the entire body, and that kills the older person or the leukemia patient. So we're only going to take the proteins from the young plasma and put that into the older people. So the study is being designed. I'll keep you updated through future services we put on at the church. And to conclude this presentation, we get back to smallpox. And you look at how long it took for mankind to develop the technology that resulted in the eradication of smallpox. It was first described in writing 1200 BC in Egypt, and may have been described earlier in China. And it took all the way till 1796 AD for the vaccine to be validated. Now, by the way, lots of people before Edward Jenner had come up with inoculations using live smallpox viruses or even vaccines using cowpox. But that technology wasn't carried forward. They saved people, and then the doctor may have died, and the technology got lost. That happened with parabiosis. It's 1972-73, it fell off a cliff and it's being revived. We can't let this go. We've got to make this parabiosis research doable. We've got to make it happen because we're aging. We need to take advantage of the technology that exists today. So the bottom line is we're going to cure biological aging at some point. The question is, can any of us really afford to wait? And that is the conclusion of my presentation. And Max Moore or Neil?